Hello, my name is Catherine Moore, social worker, mom, coffee lover, and founder of Social Workers Rise, where we inspire social workers to connect, expand their knowledge, and change more lives than they ever thought possible. I'm so excited you found my podcast. We will talk everything social work on every level from micro to macro. We will hear the stories of social workers who are doing big things, learn new skills, and most importantly, give you actionable steps to make a difference today. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Social Workers Rise. It is your host, Catherine here. This week, we're getting all the details about how to prepare for an interview as a school social worker. We're talking with Jasmine Lamitte, who is actually the one hiring school social workers in her school district. I want to give you a little bit of background information on school social work, some statistics that you need to know, and what kind of salary ranges are we going to be looking at on a national United States level. So, in a nutshell, overall, school social workers are the ones who are providing social services and assistance to students and families in the schools with the overall goal of improving the social and psychological functioning of the children and families in the school. They're really trying to maximize the well-being and the academic functioning of the children so that, they stay in school and they don't drop out. I did some quick research. So this is based on June 2022 research. I looked up the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and their most recent data was from 2021. So on a national level, you can expect the average salary for a school social worker to be about $32 an hour, and the average yearly is $66,700. But there are a lot of variables to these numbers. This isn't including if you have a bachelor's, a master's, or if you're licensed. Additionally, this is all of the states combined. So if you live in one of the higher paying states, then that's going to look a little bit different. The top paying states are going to be New Jersey, Connecticut, District of Columbia, New York, and of course, California. And the places where they're hiring the most or that have the highest level of employment of school social workers is going to be in California, New York. No surprise there. That's probably where the most concentration of children are in schools. And then followed by Texas, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. So everything's changing so fast right now. Social workers are in extremely high demand. And so when I saw that the stats were from a year ago, I said, I don't really trust that because I think that the stats have gone up. And I was right. So I did a quick search on social work jobs near me. I'm in Southern California, but I also looked at other states around the country as well. And this is what I found. Again, the salary range is all over the place. Everywhere from $48,000 per year, which is the lowest that I saw, and this was for if you're new, if you're straight out of school, you're not licensed yet, all the way up to $114,000, which in talking to some of my school social work buddies, I'm pretty sure you can go higher than 114,000, but that was what I was able to pull in the search. So anywhere from 48 to 114 per year, which is pretty sweet. And again, a lot of them require a master's. They want your MSW. They also want to see that you are pursuing licensure. And a lot of the jobs, LCSW is not necessarily required, but it definitely helps because I did notice a big salary jump when the positions had an LCSW specified. They are going to pay you more. A lot of times we get asked, what kind of experience or is there any kind of certificates or extra training that I should get in order to prepare for these types of jobs? I would First, I would say go and look on the job descriptions and read a bunch of the job descriptions for the types of employment that you want and see what they're looking for. In my quick search, I saw that a lot of the positions called for obviously experience with youth, working with children, but specialties included children with trauma, LGBTQ plus, children with chemical dependency or addiction, emotional disturbance. So, if you can find ways or areas or trainings that would focus around these, or if you can get experience with these types of population first, then that could be helpful to landing that interview in the first place. We're going to hear a short ad by our sponsor, the Rise Directory. Then we will hop right into our conversation with Jasmine Lamitte. This episode is proudly brought to you by the Rise Directory, a national directory of clinical supervisors who are dedicated to helping the next generation of clinical social workers grow in their clinical skills. The link is in the show notes. Check it out and tell every clinical supervisor you know about this directory. Hi, Jasmine. Welcome to the Social Workers Rise podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, school social work is a really hot topic. People love school social work, and I can definitely see why. You get the summers off. I mean, that's
yes,
my big reason.
Definitely a big reason to go into the field.
Yeah. And plus, you guys do very important work, very much needed within the school system. People love working with the kiddos. So
Definitely.
Good.
Yeah. And you get to see, kids in other types of environments, right? So not just your 1 hour session, you get to see them at their basketball game or, at lunch or, other parts of their life, which is really fulfilling.
That's cool. So it's not always you're just seeing them when there's a problem.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, which is different than medical social work because we really only see you when you have a medical problem.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I know that a lot of people, we're going to start graduating here. It's May. So they're going to start graduating, applying for these jobs. If they haven't already, now that I think about it, if someone wanted to start in September, when do they need to apply?
Now. We start the hiring process for the following school year, typically February, March. So we'll post our, job descriptions and all of that. And then, I know for people that are like, well, I don't have my degree yet, or maybe I don't have the credential yet. I would say still apply, because you can put on your resume, expected graduation or expected credential date. And, if it's a reputable program, like I know we always have people from USC, and I know that those credentials and that degree is going to clear. So I would still apply even though you're waiting, because definitely now is the time when we're trying to hire.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good thing to know. If we happen to be listening to this episode later, we kind of missed this window. What is some experience that we could do maybe for a year or, however long, just to make our resume really stand out and get us some good skills? Like what type of positions or roles or skills would be helpful for as a prerequisite for a school social work position?
Yeah. So I obviously I love accepting people that have been in schools and know just the kind of the unique position that we're in as a school social worker. But I have hired amazing people on my team of social workers in schools that have experience in community-based mental health. Maybe they did work within the foster care system. Maybe they worked in schools in like a different capacity. I've had people that have been, ABA therapists, or they've been, working at summer programs. So, I think the main thing for me is I want to make sure that they know how to work with children and that they have that experience and that passion. And then in the interview, you can really highlight how those skills can translate to school social work, based on the job description that you're interviewing for.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Are there required prerequisites or certifications that we need to become a school social worker?
Yeah, so it really varies by state. So in California, we have the Pupil Personnel Services Credential, or the PPSC, which not all MSW programs have a program for PPSC. So I know, for instance, USC has one and Cal State Long Beach have one. But Cal State Dominguez Hills doesn't, but UCLA has a post MSW PPSC program that you can enroll in. And it's like 5 Saturdays, and then they'll take any school internship that you had in your MSW and apply those hours to count for the PPSC. I know, I got my master's degree in Chicago, and they have a school social work credential called the Type 73. But I do know there are states that don't have a requirement at all. So best to look and see what the requirements are on your at your local level.
Okay. And would that be with the Board of Education in your state?
Yeah. So in California, it's the credential, the CTC, the teacher credentialing agency. And I know in Illinois, it was something similar. So yeah, you can definitely check on your school's education or your state's education website to see what are the credentials for each position that are required.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, cool. So when we are applying or, kind of tailoring our resume to a school social work position, are there certain skills that you would recommend that we highlight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would, I think every school social work position looks a little bit different in terms of the job description and who's writing it, right? If it's somebody that is like me, who's a social worker, who's done the job, if mine looks a certain way. And then, if it's a at a charter school who maybe got some funding and wants a school social worker, what they have envisioned for what that role is might be completely different. So I think starting with your base resume of the things that you've accomplished, the things that you've, the things that really stand out. And then I would look at each job description and tailor the resume a little bit so that, the things that are listed on the top usually are the things that are the priority for the role. So you want to make sure that that is either captured in your cover letter or captured in your resume. In terms of skills, that's something that I'm actually getting more used to seeing on resumes. So that's not something that I always look at. I'm really looking at the experience. I'm looking at, how long they've been in the field. I'm looking at also, are there grammatical errors or other things that, would indicate, their writing ability, their communication style. But I would say, even if it's not on the resume, something to highlight would be time management, being able to backwards plan, right? So looking at the scope of a year and seeing, okay, what am I focusing on in August? What am I focusing on in September? Prioritization, right? So everything is important. And then there's things that are the most important, right? So student safety always comes first, but it doesn't necessarily take away from that deadline that you have on Friday. So how are you going to adjust your schedule in order to get those things done as well? The big things like empathy, compassion, all the things that you would imagine a social worker would have. But I would say in schools, you have to be really flexible. You have to be able to, make a way and find a way. So you may not always have a space to work, and, you're not always the top of mind when people are planning things. So you have to make your voice heard to make sure that your needs are being met as well.
So a lot of different skills that I heard there: communication, advocacy, time management, prioritization, empathy. I mean, a lot of different skills that we can have that a lot of times we naturally have, but some others we might have to work on a little bit.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. So you have actually done interviews for school social workers. Is that right? Like you host the interviews? Okay.
Yes. Yes. For the last, I would say 7 years. So yeah, going through the resumes, doing screeners with people to see if they're a good culture fit, designing interviews, all of that. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, okay. We want to know, what do you ask in the interviews? Or if you can't give all the details, like what are the types of questions that we should expect?
Yeah. I definitely will say that every year I update the questions to, based on learning from people that I've hired or learning, kind of what's relevant at the time. So even this year, I've made some adjustments. I want to make sure that I'm including questions about anti-racism and how your racial identity impacts the work that you do with your students and the communities that you serve. So I want to have that sense of self-awareness, regardless of how you identify racially. That's a really big, really important to me, and to be able to be culturally responsive in your sessions with students. I also ask specific questions about supporting LGBTQ youth and any experience working with trans and non-binary students. How are you supporting them? I don't expect people to be an expert, but I'm also looking again for alignment that, your values align with what I find to be important for my department and the work that we're doing. So be prepared to answer questions like that, I would say. And then, I would say there's probably going to be questions, about the special education process. And so I know for interns or people that are just graduating in your social work program, you may or may not have had a lot of experience actually delivering counseling to students with IEPs because you're not credentialed. So you really need to be able to highlight ways that you were able to insert yourself in that process or do some research. What are the different eligibilities? Even though I haven't carried a case, I've been to IEP meetings. I've seen how the notes are documented, right? So that to me, those things are coachable, but if you have completely no understanding, I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that. I would also say be prepared to answer a lot of scenarios and vignettes. We love those in social work. And, especially in an interview that has a principal or somebody that's not in the field, it's really one of their only opportunities to see, kind of the things that would happen behind closed doors that are confidential. So, when you are going over your answer for a vignette, make sure that you take your time. I've noticed when people just immediately answer as soon as we're done reading the scenario, they often miss pieces to the question. It may not be as thorough, it might be rushed. So it's okay to take some time. In my interviews, I'm a visual learner. So I always either copy it and put it in the chat or give them a visual copy so they can read it as I'm saying it aloud. Not everybody is that nice. So have a pen and paper ready to take notes about how you're going to answer. And make sure there's a tech in interviewing called the STAR method. So situation, task, action, results. So as you're responding with, what you would do in a certain scenario, make sure you hit all of those points. So what happened? What were you required to do because of that situation? What was the actions did you take? And then what was the outcome of it? So make sure that it's kind of answering all pieces of that.
Nice. Very good tips. Thank you for sharing. Hey, it's Catherine here. I hope you're enjoying this episode. We're going to take a quick break to listen to this ad from our sponsor. Do you want to make your own podcast? Spotify has a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And this is the platform that I use because it makes it so simple to record and distribute your podcast all in one place using your cell phone. What you need to do is download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. If you're planning to take the BBS Law and Ethics exam, the ASWB Master's or Clinical Licensure exam, or if you're studying for the MFT exam, then you need a proven program that can help you understand the exam questions and pass with confidence. If this is you, I highly recommend the Therapist Development Center. I personally use TDC to pass my law and ethics and clinical exams and found the program provided me with everything I needed to pass with confidence. TDC's program integrates various ways of learning in an organized fashion, containing all of the information you need to pass without the overwhelm. And now, bonus, TDC is also offering a library of continuing education courses that fulfill your license renewal requirements and will support you in your career development. If this sounds like something that you need, visit their website, therapistdevelopmentcenter.com, and use the code SWRISE10 at checkout to receive 10% off any of their CE courses, including their brand new course, On the Edge of Life, an Introduction to Suicidality. You can also check out the link in the show notes. One question that kind of popped in my head as you were talking about, having experience in certain education, would you say that knowledge, like what would be more important, I guess, knowledge, experience, or passion / motivation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think personality and like culture fit in terms of like the school culture are the most important things to me, because those are things that are difficult to teach and coach. So, experience is great too, but there's also, if somebody is really set in their ways and I have a certain way that I like to do things, I almost like having kind of people that are green and fresh and moldable to come in and kind of like mold them into the, social workers that I have on my team. So for me personally, that's usually what I'm looking for. Is, do we connect? Are you able to, even if you don't know an answer, are you able to like have good critical thinking to kind of problem solve how you would approach that situation? Because for me, I've been a social worker, including internship year, like 14 years, right? And there's still things that come across my table or consult calls that I get that I've not experienced, right? But I'm able to pull from my previous experiences. I'm able to use critical thinking to figure out how to respond. And so that's a skill that I think makes really great social workers. Like we don't always have the answer, but we figure out how to find an answer.
Right. Yeah. And we're never going to know everything because things are constantly changing.
Yes, exactly.
So new problems, new solutions, new laws, new regulations, new students.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what makes our field so exciting, right? You shouldn't be staying stagnant and doing the same things that you did in your career 10 years ago. There's things that are going to adjust and evolve and completely throw out for new things.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. So personality fit, which I can see that, once you mention it, because I'm thinking back to when I was working on teams, when there was a personality misfit, if you will, someone who is kind of just not jiving well with the group and there's conflict and it turns into a toxic environment very quickly to the point where I would contemplate like not wanting to go to the meeting, maybe not even wanting to go to work, depending on how the situation is.
Right. So, yeah. And that's, there's one bad apple can spoil the bunch. Right. And I never, as me hiring for school teams, I don't want somebody that I bring in to be that problem. I want them to be part of the solution. So that's really important to me for sure, is making sure that they are aligned with our values, the personality. I look for people that can build rapport really quickly. We usually within like the first 10 minutes of the interview, you can kind of tell if, wow, I'm like leaning in to learn more about you, or like, oh, okay, I'm not feeling it, so, and that's, I think, an important skill because in schools, we have kids that are on our caseload and then we have kids and families that just show up that we've never met. Often in their, in a crisis situation where you need to be able to build rapport and trust really quickly so that they feel comfortable so you can support them with the next steps. So in an interview, your first impression and being able to pull us in is really important.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And for all areas of social work and honestly, just kind of working in general, if you're working with people, to be able to build that rapport very quickly. But especially with us, because sometimes we'll be doing crisis response and we don't have time to do a full intake and assessment and get to know you and read your whole profile before we go. We just have to go and say, oh my gosh, what's going on? Jasmine, I'm here to help. How do I help?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So what are some other tips, maybe some random tidbits that we hadn't mentioned that you feel is important for someone who's going to go in to start school social work? Because a lot of times we have new social workers listening to this or social workers looking to make a transition and they'll listen to this episode before they go into an interview or to prepare. So is there anything else that you would add to help them with that?
Yeah. So I think this is a common one, but you'd be surprised how many people I do interview and I feel like they haven't done this. Definitely do your research about the school, about the organization, about the job description, like what exactly is being asked. Oftentimes, questions are going to be pulled from those three things, right? Like, what is our mission? So thinking about what kind of questions might be asked related to that, any new initiatives that might be posted on the website or on their social media. And I know for me, if we're asking, what brought you to apply to this position? This is an opportunity to really stroke the ego of the hiring team, right? Oh, well, I saw on your website that you do X, Y, and Z, and I love that. And it aligns to me because blah, 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 right? So it's like, wow, one, you're making me feel good because I posted that. And two, you're showing that you did your research. So that's really important. I would say, when you are preparing for your the scenario responses, make sure that you can identify even before the interview, like think of some accomplishments that you've had or challenges, and just kind of practice writing a prompt using that STAR situation, task, action, result, just so that you're coming in with already some things top of mind that could be applied to any type of question. They're most likely going to ask something related to crisis situations, suicide risk assessment. So if you have had opportunities to do that, definitely, have those ready. If you haven't, do some research about, what you would have done in those situations. There's probably a lot of questions about behavior because that comes up quite a lot. Even though we're not behaviorists, we're often the point person for that as well. So I would, I think you could do Googling too, and it can be your friend and kind of just to prepare you for interview questions. Even if they don't come up, you'll feel a lot more confident going in if you have had those kind of succinct answers ready to go. The other thing I would say is the leaving a lasting impression. So this yesterday alone, I had 3 interviews for positions. Tomorrow I have another 3. So, for us, we're seeing candidates a lot. And so you definitely want to think about ways that you can stand out. One way to do that is the questions that you ask at the end of the interview. So you'll always usually have an opportunity to ask questions. You can ask logistical questions, but make sure if you're asking a question like salary that it's not already posted on the website. I don't mind when people ask that because of course I wouldn't want to continue in an interview process, but I didn't know what I was getting paid. But I know some people, some interviewers, that really rubs them the wrong way for whatever reason. So if it's not available, I think it's appropriate to ask. If it's very clearly on the website or on the job description, like, just don't ask that. The other thing, making sure that your questions stand out. The common questions I get every single time, to the point now in my beginning interview, I have the candidate tell me about themselves, what brought them here. And then I pause and I talk about our department, because there are questions that come up all the time. So I'm like, let me get ahead of this. So supervision, always asked. So I already frame that. What is the typical day of a school social worker is another one that comes up a lot. And I always say there isn't a typical day if you worked in school social work. So thinking about questions that will be like, wow, this person's really done their research, or they, are really a critical thinker. Like what would you hope that I'd accomplish within the first 3 months of being employed with you? Or, what would be a major need at the school that you would want me to prioritize and address first, right? So things like you're already putting yourself in that position and thinking about, how you're going to make an impact. Those always stick out to me. And it doesn't hurt to follow up with an email. Just thanking the team. If you don't have an email address, you usually have somebody that you've been coordinating with. So I know we have a talent associate that kind of does the scheduling for me, but she will always forward me any emails that come in saying, thank you so much. And just, again, highlighting some of your skills and your excitement for that position. So those always stick out to me as well.
Okay, awesome. So some really great tips on how to prepare, how to research, and also how to stand out among a number of applicants that you're having to see all the time. Those are awesome. So 2 more questions for me. And I'm wondering, how important is it that we know about the DSM diagnoses?
Not really important at all in schools, actually. I'm speaking for just what I know about Southern California and Chicago, so I can't speak for every state, but we can't diagnose in schools typically in the school social work position, even if like I'm licensed, like I could diagnose. It becomes a liability if even if you have done like a screener and you like know that this child is depressed, if you are saying this child is depressed, that could just open up some lawsuits and things with parents. And I know California is like one of the most litigious states in terms of, special education law and even, with families. So you can say like depression-like symptoms or ADHD-like symptoms with encouraging them to then, get a referral for an evaluation. So, you don't have to know those things. I think having the basics, right? So the common, mental illness that we see in children in schools would be depression, anxiety, trauma, I would say are pretty like the big three. So knowing the symptoms of those, I think if you have that in your pocket, that's pretty much like the main things that you might see in an interview.
Okay, awesome. And how important is having a LinkedIn profile or an online presence when applying to a job?
Yeah. Not in schools, not as important, I would say. I don't think I've ever, for a candidate, really like looked them up on social media or tried to find them on LinkedIn, especially because LinkedIn will say, this person's looking at you. I'm like, no.
Confidentiality, LinkedIn.
Right. Like, oh my gosh, she's stalking me. But yeah, it's not something that I know in my 23 schools and even like some of my colleagues it's not something that we typically look into. So, I think it helps when if you're able to make connections with people. If I have gotten people finding me on LinkedIn, saying that they applied and like, that's fine. So that I might look at their page. So you want to have that set up, but I think it's an important networking tool to have in general, but not usually something I'm basing, people moving through the process on.
Sure. Okay. So it's helpful, but not required.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. Was there anything that we didn't cover? I feel like we covered a lot today.
I guess the other thing I would say about social media is the only times where it's come up is, once they're hired. And if you do have a pretty public social media presence, I will tell you right now, parents and caregivers, kids are going to be looking you up. So, I've always had my personal page, like super private and blocked. I don't have anything crazy on there, but I just don't want to open up that door of students and families like being let into that part of my life. So, and still I'll have kids find me because they're friends with like a teacher on there or something like that. So, definitely when you do get your job, be prepared for that and, decide if you want your page private or if there are things that you maybe need to remove that can be taken out of context, something to think about when you work with kids.
Definitely. Yeah. Because they're super tech savvy. They'll find you.
Oh yeah. They will find you.
So where can we professionally connect with you?
Professionally, yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Jasmine Lamitte, like nice to meet you. And you can also find me on my Instagram at Social Work Sage.
Awesome. I'm never going to forget your last name now.
Everyone mispronounces it like Lamitte, but if I say that, I'm like, you'll never forget.
Yep. It's so true. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. It was a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thank you. And let me know if you need anything else or if you want me to follow up with any questions that come through. I'm happy to come back.
All right. Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Social Workers Rise. If you loved it, please open up your iTunes, tap the 5 stars, and leave a short note on why you love listening to the Social Workers Rise podcast. Also, if you want to share it on social media, I absolutely love it. You'll have me fangirling all over you. Take a screenshot and share it and tag me at Social Workers Rise on Instagram and Facebook. Lastly, just want to leave a little bit of legal disclosure here that the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Social Workers Rise podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done so at your own risk. This podcast should not be used in place of professional advice, therapy, or clinical supervision. And with that, my friends, I'll talk to you next week.